Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Vivid webinar. Today's topic is how to use a discovery tool to supercharge your ITSM program. Next slide, please. Our webinar is brought to you today by Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Next slide. I'll be your host today. My name is Laura Walker. It's a full-time job. I work for HPE partner Stratacom. We're a partner within the IT service management space since 2001. In addition to my role at Stratacom, I also run various local chapters around the country, as well as a service management special interest group. Next slide. We have three speakers today. Our first speaker is Doran Orbach. He's a senior product manager for CMS at HPE. We also have Bill Dyke, product manager, CMS. And finally, Nick Rendell, product marketing manager for CMS. Next slide. A few housekeeping items before we get going. This is a live session. It's being recorded, and the recordings will be available to all Vivid members at the conclusion. We also will have a session Q&A that will happen at the end of the presentation today. If you think of questions as we go through, please type those questions in the questions pane. Next slide. If you don't already see the question and polling pane, click on the orange icon with a white arrow and it'll expand. You can find the question chat and you can find the poll response there as well. Next slide. With that, I will turn it over to Nick to kick us off this morning.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks to everyone for making time to tune into our webinar on discovery tools. We have an exciting agenda today, and we'll cover the different applications a discovery tool can be used for, provide some real-world success stories of discovery tools being used to their full potential, and we'll review HPE's discovery tool in detail. We will wrap up the webinar with live Q&A to ensure that you get all discovery-related questions answered from our product and application experts. So let's first start with a live poll to see what percentage of the audience is using a discovery tool today. And please take a moment to vote on your screen before we move forward.
So we'll have about 30 or 40 seconds of time for you to complete the poll. Again, if you don't see it, you should see an icon on the right hand of your screen that's a orange button with that white arrow inside. If you click that, it'll expand it amongst all the other panes. You should see the polling pane. The results are coming in. We have about 83% of our audience who's already voted. Of those 83%, 82% say yes, and 18% are saying no. I would say with that number, we've almost hit 90%. Let's go ahead and close it with 83% yes, 17% no.
Fantastic. So it's great to see, most people are already using a discovery tool. For the rest, I will provide a very brief introduction to discovery tools and how they fit into the greater IT operations picture. As the name suggests, a discovery tool allows you to discover configuration items and IT infrastructure in order to map dependencies within your IT environment. This information feeds into your CMDB and is then made available to internal consumers. An easy analogy for a discovery tool is to think of it as taking an X-ray of your IT environment before you operate via change and configuration management. The better quality of discovery tool that you employ, the higher resolution X-ray you will have of your IT environment. There are multiple methods of discovery available today, including agentless or agent-based, which we will cover in detail later in the presentation. While discovery tools and CMDB technology have been available for some time, their necessity is only growing in importance as the IT operations landscape becomes continually more complex, particularly around cloud migration. Let's take a brief look at a few recent statistics. For example, Gartner estimates more than 80% of mission-critical IT outages result from a lack of coordination between change and configuration management processes. This is squarely in the realm of discovery and CMDB. Further, the amount of private enterprises at the enterprise level using private cloud grew 9% in 2015. DevOps also continues to grow. And what I found astounding was the lack of resources for cloud migration was the #1 challenge for cloud users in 2016, being able to map your IT landscapes before you migrate to the cloud. This also is an issue squarely involving your CMDB and discovery tool. Before diving into applications of discovery tools, I think it's relevant to look at the simplified internal HPE view of how discovery tools support a variety of IT operations. Looking first on the left-hand side, HPE Universal Discovery captures database information through agentless, agent-based, passive discovery, or a hybrid mix of these types, and standardizes this data before inserting it into the CMDB to limit discrepancies. It's important to note that we call our discovery tool Universal Discovery because it's specifically designed to find as many types of configuration items out there as possible, not simply ones from HPE. Once these CIs are discovered, standardized, and entered into the CMDB, automated service modeling is used to create service models of the vast frameworks of CIs. This is a process that was once manual and can take weeks to complete and can now be done in a number of hours. Once organizational CIs have been found, standardized, and mapped, they are ready to support the many different operations within an organization, which we'll talk about next. First, we have monitoring and service impact modeling. This is a more traditional CMDB use case. Clients today need to realize more than just the value for monitoring by combining triggers with HPE UD to discover the complete service impact of their business services. By connecting all the dots to this picture, a complete view into the cost of service impact is realized. Next, we have security operations. This is a rapidly growing use case given the amount of threats that enterprise businesses face today. And the CMDB is used to map threats to CIs across an organization and spot trends, allowing for quicker identification and mitigation of these threats across the organization. Next, we have integrated service management. This is also a somewhat traditional CMDB use case, and in order to effectively operate IT processes governed by their service manager tool, customers need accurate and current information about their logical and physical infrastructure and those application dependencies. We also have cloud services discovery. This is what I was talking about when I referenced the recent statistics earlier. Cloud usage is only growing. Keeping pace with the holistic view required for today's private and public IT environments is now possible with HPE Universal Discovery and UCMDB as they provide insight to the linkages for private clouds and public clouds, regardless of the web, database, app tier, and where they reside. This can even be in Amazon Cloud, for example. We also have data center transformation. The days of doing manual move group analysis are basically over with Universal Discovery and UCMDB, as they are leveraged together to complete the IT environment for a data center transformation or a move initiative. This reduces costs and impact at the same time by leveraging accurate and up-to-date information. Finally, we have software license optimization. Software license audits are becoming increasingly common and increasingly costly, and users need verified data to prove that they are neither under or over deploying the enterprise software. HPE Universal Discovery brings the value of deep discovery into software compliance, and when integrated with HP Asset Manager, and especially so when a major software license audit team comes knocking, you can ensure that you are compliant and using your licenses effectively. So those are the 6 key use cases we'd like to highlight. I'm now going to hand it over to Laura to do a quick poll to see how you and the audience are using your discovery tools today.
We have 5 different choices here, so if you could look through the selections and see which best fits your situation, that would be wonderful. We'll give about 20 more seconds here. About half of you have currently voted. So far, the first answer, ITSM and change incident. leading the way, followed by Cloud and Data Center Discovery. We'll take about 5 more seconds. Okay, so let's go ahead and close the poll. We have about 85% of folks who have voted. The top score at 63% is ITSM and change/incident management. The second most popular, 48%, cloud or data center discovery. In third place is software license optimization at 40%. The final choice, not applicable, is 21% and 10% for security operations.
Excellent. So it's good to see that there's quite a bit of room for improvement out there for other use cases past simply service management. So great to hear from the audience. Next up, we're going to hear from Daron Orbach. He's going to provide some real-world examples of customers using their discovery tool for more than just service management out there.
Hi, everyone. Can you now hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. So my name is Daron Orbach. I'm the product manager for configuration management system. And thank you, Nick, for the introduction. What we've seen, and we've seen from your poll, is that on your journey to unfold CMS and discovery mainly, ITSM is definitely one of the first stations. We've seen that most of the customers use ITSM as the first choice for implementing universal discovery. But the use cases that we found with customers are actually varied. And you have shown us that the journey to the cloud is also a journey for the discovery tools, because what once have been discovery of physical servers and turned to be discovery also of virtual machines is now definitely on the edge to discover public clouds, private clouds, and with the Universal Discovery tool, as we will show you, it's definitely achievable, and we can discover hybrid environments and discover environments that span out both to cloud and both to areas such as AWS and Azure, and both to private clouds of OpenStack and Cloud Foundry and other implementation that resolves around different technology stacks. And with this, I would like to show you 2 use cases and implementation that were done with customers that show how they actually use the discovery tool to get to great success with the implementation. The first one, which is nameless, but we will show it as a #1 utility Fortune 500 company. So it's a very, very large implementation of our discovery tools. So what they did, they have used the configuration management system, like many of you, to start their ITSM journey. So before setting up the service manager, they've initiated a configuration management system in order to achieve success with the ITSM solution. And once the configuration management system is in place and providing the data that Nick discussed, which is the configuration items and the service map that are mapped via the service, you get multiple options for its users. The first one is, of course, is for the delivery of the processes, of the change processes. So you know, to avoid the outage that Nick talked about, you know what will be impacted if you're going to make a change. You're not just making a change out there without knowing which service will be impacted, or who is the owner of the server that you're going to touch, so you can call him and let him know that his server and his service are going to be impacted. And with this customer, we can see that they improved the ownership and support accountability, because each asset and each server and each CI that was in the CMS implementation needed to have an owner. They improve also the inventory for the operational assets. So it means that you know if the other side of this coin is if there are no owners for these servers and it's not playing part in each service, well, what do we use this server for? And can we reassign it to another area? And by this, of course, to save cost. Another measurement that was taken and was actually measured by this account as part of their KPIs, is to see if they can reduce the MTTR when addressing incidents, when addressing problems in the system, and we will be able to see that they were able to do it and to really reduce and show significant and achievable gains in these areas. And the last is the part of the asset management and understanding the total cost of a service and the total cost of what different groups in the organizations are using. And with our ability, with the universal discovery ability to integrate with different tools, one of them is tools of asset management. Specifically here it was the case for Asset Manager. They were able to show the total cost of a service and to do a real chargeback for a service for the organization. Let's see some of the results that were achieved by this project. 20% reduction in MTTR. So service might go down. Even if you're doing the perfect post, things can happen. One of the measures to improve is how fast you can recover from this, and 20% definitely in these cases, it's a very nice improvement. $2 million cost saving that can be measured by improving the accuracy of how we associate servers, how we associate assets to owners, to locations, to services. What are these assets, who owns them, and what are they used for? And the last is definitely the avoidance of outages, the planning of changes in a calculated way when you can know what is the impact that you are going to create on the services that your organization provides. So this was the first story that we wanted to tell you. The next one is a bit of a different story of a different company, also a very large company. It's a very large retailer, US retailer. And one of the things to show you is that discovery can scale to really, really large organization with many data centers, with many branches, and with many, in this case, it was 46 data centers, 10,000 stores, and many, many servers and desktops. So the discovery tools, once you look at them, you should be able to see that they discover not just desktops and client machines. Of course, this is one thing, to know the inventory that you have and the software that is running on them. But a very critical part is, of course, the data center, and the combination of these two is what you want to achieve, really, to be able to discover both data center and desktops, and doing it with the same discovery tool. In this case, they integrated the UCMDB, which is the CMDB that UD naturally fits into. They integrated it with many different products, some of them to enrich the information, for example, to enrich the information from NNMI, which is a network tool, in order to get more data into the UCMDB. When we talk about discovery, by the way, not everything needs to be discovered. Some things can be integrated or be achieved or be federated or gained from other systems that already manage them and have reliable data that you can count on. Another aspect that we saw is 500 service models that were mapped, which is a very large number. It shows of maturity in the ability to map these services. We know it's not a simple task. As Nick showed, we have the automated service modeling that can help you, but mapping services is always that needs to be well thought of, and achieving 500 services in production is a great achievement. So a really nice implementation that focus eventually on the incident and changes and on asset management as well. And with also achievable results, some of these numbers are actually accounted by reducing the need for other systems that were doing parallel things. And some of them are actually measured by improving the processes, as we discussed before. The discovery is now used as foundation for the ITSM and as a way to also reduce the amount of data center and to consolidate data centers, which is definitely one of the use cases that we see these days, with many both reduction of data centers on one end, or moving of workloads into the cloud, which also involve in changing and consolidating data centers. So a very large implementation with measurable results for the discovery process. And as a summary for all for these two use cases, we can see that the main drivers that achieved by this project usually involve around reducing outages, improving, shortening the MTTR, the time to resolution, reduce the cost for hardware and software, get to operational efficiency with understanding what is connected to what, which service does it serve, who owns it, and do we need it or not, and can we reassign it? And the last, of course, is also a compliance, asset management compliance and software compliance, and different, even more compliance that is PCI compliance. We've seen many organizations and different types of organization or mandatory compliance that are needed to do with this product. So this is some achievement that we saw with accounts, of course, two examples out of many. And with this, we would like to get you into a more fine look into what universal discovery is capable of and what are its qualities. And Bill Dyke, which is my colleague, will present it. Bill, please.
Talk about a collection of technologies that we have. Doran talked about service mapping. I'll go over a little bit of detail about how that works inside of UD and UCMDB, and then I'll go through some more of the technical details of how universal discovery itself actually works. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is what we call automated service modeling, ASM for short. And this describes more of the detail associated with how to actually build those service maps. So Doran mentioned that it's actually an achievement to be able to get this done. One of the things that we've noticed over time and what the needs are for various components of discovery is that doing service mapping and service modeling is something that a business that wants to understand how their infrastructure works from a business perspective, they typically will go through the service mapping process, but this is a very manual process and requires a lot of knowledge, and in a lot of cases the knowledge that is necessary to be able to accomplish this mapping may no longer even exist in the company, especially if the applications and the services have been around for a while. And so automated service modeling is the ability to be able to allow universal discovery to find the content and the services automatically rather than require someone to get in there and manually do that. What that results in is a lot of benefits to you. One of the benefits, one of the capabilities is that you don't have to start from the infrastructure. You can start from the service, the entry point of that service. And so typically the entry point of this is a web service of some kind. You might have a URL that you go to. That URL could be the actual web service provider itself, or if you have a load balancer, it would be presented by the load balancer. And so our ASM tool starts at that point and then drills down into the stack to discover all of the software components that are associated with it. So all you really need to know is where is the starting point, and then you let ASM go from there. So the whole point of this is that instead of manually going through this process and hoping that you have it correct, you can do this in an automated fashion and have it happen a lot faster. And so the value that you're looking for is dramatically reduced. It's a lower time to value. UD has the capability of discovering from the bottoms up as well, and we'll talk about that as well. And since it's all happening in the same environment, all of this data sits in the same database, and so the data that you've discovered from looking at the system at the lowest level up, wherever there are merges or wherever the data crosses, those maps join together. And so if you're looking from the top down and see that software, you have a collection of running software that's connected to databases and applications, well, you'll know that those systems are connected to servers, and then any data that have been discovered about those servers that ASM wouldn't normally see, it all gets merged together. And so you have a map from the very top from the business perspective, and you also have a map from the very bottom from an infrastructure perspective. One of the capabilities that ASM does, like I just mentioned, is that if you have the ability to import data from storage or network devices, or if you have virtualization environments that are set up, when you do ASM, it recognizes all of this. It can talk to the servers that are providing this content, and it will see all this information, so the maps that you get are actually a full map. I'll show you on the next slide here how user-friendly this is. There's really not much that you have to do to be able to get it started. And then the way that it actually does this is more than just looking at configuration files. It does it by going to known configuration files for different applications, and there's a whole host of applications that we support. It also does this by looking at the servers and connecting to them and understanding all of the TCP connections that those servers can provide. And based on the TCP connection, it will look through to the other side of that connection to see what's out there, and then talk to those systems to further expand your map. So how do you do this? It's actually pretty simple. You're presented in the UCNV browser the ability to be able to create a service model. You see that here on the left. So you, as the business owner, would identify the service entry point, which is a fancy way of saying the URL that you use to access the system. You click on the Start Modeling button, and then you sit back and you watch the map actually appear. And when it's done, you'll see a map that shows all of the software components that are associated with that particular business service. And then you have the ability to view deeper layers. You can see on the screen there's an Add Layer section. What that's doing is it's not actually like requiring you to type something in. It's basically you're right now seeing on the screen all of the software components. You can add the other components that already exist there to the picture if that's what you want to see. So you could see what nodes there are. You could see how the storage devices that are available, how they're connected, and how the lines that they provide out to the servers that are out there. You can see how the network and layer 2 connections are. You can see that all on the same map. So the ability to be able to filter in and through is all there. You can also do things like impact simulation. And so if you want to be able to estimate what's going to happen if you took down a particular component in that environment for a change, you can select that component and identify the severity of the impact, like critical if you're going to bring it down and make a change. And then you can take a look at the impact on the other components that exist and are related to that component that you identified. And you can see overall at the top level the impact on the service should you bring down a component of that service. In some cases, the impact will be negligible because you're doing it behind things such as clustering and load balancers, and in other cases, the impact could be significant because you're removing a component that is the only component available to that particular service to provide its function. And so you can see all of this very easily, and then other tools such as Service Manager and anything that is dealing with change can also consume this information programmatically via APIs and reach back to the users of the environment, as Doron just mentioned, to be able to give them a heads up about a change that's coming so that they can be prepared for it, or they can push back and say, not right now, we need something important is going on right now. All right, so I'm going to go now into some of the other components of Universal Discovery, talking from a bottoms-up perspective. Universal Discovery basically has two primary functions. It has an inventory function. That's taking a look at the hardware and software that you have. You would look at this from a software asset management, a SAM perspective. I know we talked about that use case, wanting to be able to see what software is installed on all of the computers to see if you're over-consuming or under-consuming to help you guide how you should be using that particular software. You can take a look at the inventory of the physical hardware so you can manage assets inside of tools such as Asset Manager to make sure that you can track where those assets are and changes on those assets over time. And then there's application dependency, which is a deeper discovery. That's the ability to be able to develop and identify relationships between your various components of the infrastructure. So you may have a server out there. You want to know what network environment it's connected to, so that you can understand topology, and you can do things such as the topology-based event correlation. You want to know all of the different software components and how they're interconnected to the different servers and the databases. For instance, if you wanted to understand the Oracle environment out there because you have an audit coming up, you could take a look at all of the Oracle databases that are stored on the servers, and then query all of the users that are on there, and query all of the requirements that are associated with an audit that comes from Oracle. All this stuff can be done through the application dependency discovery components of Universal Discovery. Gives you the data center focus we talked about, the service modeling that we've already talked about, and the ability to be able to manage the environment through the change that it will experience under normal circumstances. Universal Discovery can be done in a collection of ways. Typically, you may have heard about something called agentless. Agentless means that you're not placing an agent on a device, yet you're still able to access that device. You would actually access it via various protocols, and you would have an account that gave UCMDB the ability to connect to that server and remotely execute a collection of commands to collect that information. There's a lot of protocols that we support. There's when the job is not running, there's nothing left on the server, so there's no agent placed on the server. I know that agent proliferation is a real problem, in that there can be situations where you have many different agents from many different applications. So if your environment does not allow you to be able to do that, or you don't want to add another agent, Universal Discovery will work in that particular situation. You can also look at it from an agent perspective, and so if it's not possible in your environment to be able to set up accounts that allow Universal Discovery to access the system, you can deploy an agent to that system, and that agent will then know how to talk back and call home to UCMDB and can provide the same kind of content. And so what the result is that any kind of discovery capabilities that you need can be deployed and managed by UD in any way, agentless or agent-based, and you can do it in a hybrid mode. If you have some environments that will allow you to be able to deploy an agent, you can do that, and in other areas, if you're not allowed, you can, but you do have the ability to deploy an account to that system. You can take advantage of that. UD does not care. It gets the same information either direction, and you can do it either or both. It does not matter. So this next slide kind of talks about the details of all the different levels that Universal Discovery from the bottoms up can accomplish, and it literally is from the bottoms up is how the slide is described here. So the first level is infrastructure discovery, and so that typically starts off with understanding an IP address or a range of IP addresses that may contain devices that you're interested in. And typically these devices are devices that have an OS installed, Windows or Linux or HPUX or other flavors of Unix, or they're devices that can talk over other protocols such as SNMP, like a router or a switch. And so infrastructure discovery will get you. Will create information inside of UCMDB about the IP addresses that are out there and the devices that are connected to those IP addresses. And you can do, an example would be, you give it a network range that has 255 IPs in it, and UD will scan those IPs to see which ones actually respond. It will identify which ones respond, and then it will attempt to connect to those devices based on how you have configured it. And so if it's an agentless environment, it'll attempt to log into it using all the credentials that you've given it. And so if it's a Windows box and you happen to have a Windows credential, UD would be successful in connecting to that. If it's agent-based, it would actually then report back to UCMDB this kind of information. So the next level is inventory discovery, and this is collecting details about the devices that have responded that you have successfully been able to connect with. And so from a hardware perspective, it will identify components that asset management tools are typically interested in, such as CPUs, file systems, running software, installed software. That's a big one, to understand what software is installed in a system so that you can identify and be able to manage audits that come in. You can identify and manage the volume of software that you have installed to make sure you don't have too much installed, or that the entitlements that you purchased are being underused. The next one is virtualization and cloud. So a virtual server from a UD perspective is just simply a server. It would not be able to detect. A server will respond the same whether it's virtual or physical. But you will need to know at some point in a collection of use cases whether the server you're talking with is a virtual server and what kind of components are being provided to that virtual server from its host. So if vCenter or VMware EX is in there, how many shares are you giving it for the CPU, and understanding how that particular system is set up. And so virtualization and cloud allows you to be able to talk to these environments, and I have a slide a little bit later that describes all of the different environments that we can talk with, and provide the topology for the virtualization environment behind what you see from the from the virtual server. And so if you're discovering a vCenter environment, you'll be able to see all of the data centers that a vCenter particular holds, all of the clusters, the VMware clusters underneath that data center, all of the ESX servers that are connected into that cluster, the hypervisor layers that are there, and then all of the virtual machines that are connected to the various hypervisors that are supported by the ESX. And then you can run another tool, such as our vMotion tool, that actually keeps all that stuff up to date. Because if you're familiar with virtualization, a VM that is connected to one server today could be connected to a different server tomorrow, and if you don't keep that content clean, all of a sudden you have a VM that looks like it's connected to 20 servers, 20 ESX servers. So with our vMotion capability, we can actually manage the relationships, and so what you see is in real time what's going on inside of that particular environment. And if a VM moves from one host to another, the relationship from one host will be removed and the new relationship will be established, keeping the relationships current with where that VM is hosted at that particular time. There are a lot of different environments that we support. I have a list of them there, and I'll show a bigger picture of that later as well. There are capabilities inside of UD to be able to understand and identify the clusters and the clustering software that's involved. Load balancers to be able to track what's behind a load balancer and the servers that are there. You may be able to discover a collection of servers, but by understanding how they're related to each other and via either clusters or load balancers, that allows you to be able to properly analyze the service maps that you build or the topology that you build. If you're going to do a change, evaluate a change impact, and you have two Tomcat servers that are behind a load balancer, you're going to get a different answer. If you bring down one Tomcat server, you're not bringing down the service. You're just maybe decreasing the capability of that service, but the service is still up and running. That's a different answer than if you have two Tomcat servers that you don't happen to know are behind a load balancer. You may make incorrect assumptions in what's happening to the service if you don't understand that the service is related behind a load balancer and is clustered. So knowing that topology and being able to discover that topology is really important from a business perspective. Lastly is the application layer. This is being able to actually talk to the applications that are running on the servers in the environment. And so I've talked about Oracle, understanding the details of Oracle. UD has a capability to run the Oracle audit scripts called Oracle. We call it Oracle LMS, and what that can do is by talking to the databases, you can collect all of the information that Oracle would require of you for an audit. And so rather than having to go run the scripts that Oracle gives you independently, having to go out there and establish connections to all of the different Oracle databases on all the different servers and even understanding where they all are, if you have been using Universal Discovery all along, managing an Oracle audit becomes actually rather simple because all you're doing is running one additional component on there to collect all the information on all the databases that you already know how to access and know where they're at. You can do the same thing for middleware applications, Active Directory, Exchange, SAP, and the list goes on. So UD comes in a couple flavors. It comes in the inventory flavor, and that covers really the bottom two and a portion of the virtualization space. And then it also comes in the Advanced, which provides a topology. It used to be known as Discovery and Dependency Mapping Advanced, DDMA, but in the terminology we have now with UD, it's Universal Discovery Full, whereas the one in the inventory is known as Universal Discovery Inventory. And there are different capabilities that you can purchase from HP. Network discovery and storage discovery are capabilities that UCMDB can do, but we can also integrate with other tools that are very specialized in this manner. For instance, anything having to do with talking to storage devices via an SMI S protocol, or talking to tools like NNMI to be able to migrate the network topology that it has discovered. That data can be incorporated into UCMDB into the same maps so that you can see all the data in one single place. And let me emphasize that. Seeing all the data in one place is the important thing about all of this, because you then have the ability to be able to provide that information to any downstream application that could have interest in it. And it gives context to anything and allows all of the tools that are accessing UCMDB to collect this data to talk in the same context from the same perspective. And I found in my role, the years I spent in IT, that was incredibly important. This picture here gives you an idea of the various cloud virtualization and container technology that is currently supported by Universal Discovery. From a cloud perspective, we can today talk to Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure cloud providers. We can understand what they're providing and see the changes that they have over time. We are talking directly to these tools via their via API and are pulling down information that as it happens. We can also do that for OpenStack and whatever virtualization environment OpenStack happens to be managing, vCloud and Cloud Foundry, both public and private. And then from a virtualization perspective, there's a lot of technology we support there as well. Most recently, we've added support for OpenStack and Docker, but all of these capabilities we can see very detailed information about this. I explained what the vCenter capabilities and vMotion capabilities that we already have. For Docker, we just recently provided the capability to see inside of containers and to actually inventory the software that a container has and to manage the images just like they're managed today with the Docker registry. So a lot of capabilities that are there. This list here, it's an eye chart. It gives kind of an overview of all of the different integrations that come out of the box. And it's marked as a partial list because there's actually quite an extensive list, but these are the most common and asked about integrations that we have. The integrations in green are the ones that are actually UD and UCMDB integrations with other HP Enterprise tools, and then the ones that are in the gray are the third-party tools that we integrate with, collecting data and being able to push data. So if you're a ServiceNow or an Atrium user, you can still use and benefit from a universal discovery, because we can take the data that we discover and push it into your service management, the tool that you use. I'll just leave that there so you can look at it for a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go through just a few screen captures. We wanted to make sure that we showed a little bit of information about what actually these tools look like and the results that they provide. In this case here, I ran this discovery stuff last night and discovered a Windows server named SGD-LITVM0075, quite a long name. And so inside of the browser, which is a user tool that you would use to be able to view and interact with the data, you can take a look at this particular server's properties. This list is actually quite long, but in the interest of being legible, I've got just a little bit of it here. It shows all of the data that we have discovered about that particular server, and for those of you who are technically minded, you would see these as attributes on the particular entry for this server. And like I said, the list is quite long. The next one here is you can see the environment in which this server lives. And so you can see the server there. You can see in the infrastructure view all of the components that we discovered with the server. So it has 6 interfaces. It has a collection of all exports. It has 102 pieces of software that are installed on it. There's a collection of processes that are running, and on and on and on. And then down below you can see various connectivity, the relationships to other components that are associated with this particular device as a result of discovery. So you can see that we have an inventory scanner that's installed on that, and that we connected to this device using a shell connectivity called NT-command. You can see that we found a SQL Server instance on it. We found 8 Oracle instances on it. And you can see some of the networking stuff. And in this particular case, when I was working on the screen captures, I clicked on the Oracle icon down at the bottom that has the 8. And what you see on the right then are all of those Oracle databases. And so if you decided you wanted to take a look at some of the details about the stock trader Oracle database, where that star appeared, you would simply click on that, and you get this next page here, which would show that you're now looking at the stock trader Oracle database that's related to the Windows Server, and you can see the IP service endpoint and the processes that it's related to it, and you can see what port it's actually connected to over there. I happened to click on the IP service endpoint, so you could see that content there. And there's so much more that we can show you on this, but in the context of this particular webinar, this is what we're looking at. From a service model perspective, this is one we did just last night. I created a service model, I gave it a URL, and I clicked on the Start Modeling button there. And then you can see on the right side what's actually happening. You can see that there are the discovery is actually running, and it started with that one at the top, and it found the load balancer. It found that there were 2 Apache Tomcat instances that were behind the load balancer. It found that an application called Service Manager was running and connected to those Tomcat web instances, and it found that that Service Manager instance was hosted upon a clustered SQL Server environment, and so you can see the process is running. There are a collection of tasks that were running associated with that, and I happened to capture it in the middle of that discovery. The cool thing, and I don't think I mentioned this, is that when you look at service maps, one of the difficulties you'll have in maintaining the service map manually is that things change over time. With automated service modeling, the ASM tool that I'm showing you here, what's happening is I'm showing you the initial discovery of this service map. But keep in mind, this discovery happens on a regular basis, and by default it'll run once a day. You can set that up to run at whatever interval that you want, but it will continuously look at this. And so if all of a sudden this Service Manager instance needed more Tomcat front ends because they needed to make it a bigger system, and you placed a third Tomcat or a 4th Tomcat instance there, the next time you run discovery, those Tomcat instances would appear, and they'd be included inside of this map. And so having a service model capability that's automated is tremendously helpful because it keeps your service model up to date when you've changed it, and it doesn't allow things to get out of date, which is something, if you're doing it manually, we all know the first instance of what you have is probably the last time you look at it, and a year from now you may as well have to start over again. It could have changed so much. Okay, that's the end of the section that I have. I'm going to pass it over to Nick to continue the conversation.
Excellent. Thanks, Bill, for that overview. We did kind of, as a lot of you are currently using discovery tools today, or for the minority of you that aren't, I think we wanted to leave you with some, a group of questions to ask yourself as well as your IT teams as you are looking to either upgrade your discovery tool or, potentially getting your first one ever to best equip you for how to move forward in kind of the dynamic, ever-changing cloud-based environment. So if we could move forward the questions on this slide, please. I'm not going to go through each question just for the sake of time, as I realize we only have about 5 minutes left to get to your questions. So if we could just advance through this slide, this presentation will be available tomorrow, and you can be equipped with these questions as you continue your discovery search. We'll go to the next slide, please. So just to kind of leave you guys with a summary, you know, 3 things for you to walk away with. You know, discovery tools, they're really only growing in importance due to the, you know, these trends in data center and cloud. You know, all these discovery tools, they should be used for much more than simply mapping a CMDB. This is more or less a mindset change, but to really be getting the most out of your discovery tool, you know, you should be using it for everything from cloud to software asset management. Finally, you know, it's critical to choose a discovery tool capable of meeting the needs in the ever-changing IT environment. You know, that's everything from you know, agent-based and agentless discovery, as well as cloud capabilities. So with that, we have quite a few questions. We'll attempt to get through as many as we can in the next 5 to 10 minutes, but we do want to be you know, respectful of your time the rest of the day.
All right, are you ready for me to feed you the questions?
Yep.
Okay, the first question we have from the audience: what products and applications can discovery and dependency mapping identify? Can I identify custom software applications? And I think it's supposed to say dependencies.
So this is Bill. So we tend to provide capability for all of the publicly available software capabilities that are out there. The UD ecosystem is actually immensely configurable, and so it is for a person that understands the environment. We have the ability to be able to allow you to be able to identify whatever application that you want and to be able to create images and software for that. I was in IT before I came into this position here, and that was something that we did. We can create the UCDB data model allows you to be able to extend it so that you can add what we call configuration items to represent different content. And then if you're looking at it from an inventory perspective, we provide the ability for you to be able to train the environment to recognize software that is something that you created rather than something that is publicly available.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question I have: how important is it to have a somewhat completed discovery inventory before using ASM?
I'll take that one as well. So there's a couple things that you need to have complete before you actually do an ASM, and probably the biggest one is the load balancers. It's not possible unless you have access to the load balancer to be able to understand the components that are actually supported by that load balancer. But failing that is probably the only primary thing that you need to know beforehand. ASM will have the ability to talk to the servers and then find the connections to those servers. The network and storage usage, if that is something that you're interested in, you would have had to either incorporated the storage data and network data into UCDB via integration or run integrations beforehand to be able to see that. But that's not necessary to do the map. It just gives more content to the map should that be what you need. So I guess the bottom line is if you have load balancers in your environment, like Cisco F5, it would be important to have pre-discovered those devices, but that's it. And then you get a map from there. Anything more gives you, network and storage gives you the ability to be able to have a richer map, but it's not necessary in building the original map.
Okay. Next question. If we need to get a layer 2 topology involving server to switch to server mapping, can we get that from CMDB with UD?
So UD does have the capabilities to do that. UD is focusing more on the server layer with some ability to be able to capture layer 2. We can also incorporate and have integrations with tools like NNMI that are actually designed specifically for network, and we can bring that data into UCDB and merge it. They talk together very well. So you can do it. There are HP tools that can augment that data to do it better.
Okay. Next question: was agent or agentless used? Sorry, my screen jumped down, a new one popped up. Was agent or agentless used in the demo screenshots shown today?
In the demo screenshots, that was done via agentless. We had accounts on those particular systems. And just so you're aware, agent or agentless capabilities will result in the exact same content. There's no difference. But don't confuse that with an inventory scan of the system. An inventory scan does deploy a scanner to a system, but you can collect the scanner's data using either an agent or agentless method to obtain the data. Hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. There's a quick question I'll address here. Can we get the presentation in email? Yes, they will be emailed out and be available through the Vivid website as well. Next question, will you talk further about the application of discovery to DevOps? Thinking about the beginning of the presentation.
I can talk about this a little bit. Yes. So one of the use cases that we've seen from some of the customers, and it's picking up, of course, because DevOps is picking up, is that actually deployment is not considered as delivered to production until it's not really discovered and mapped as a service. So in their process, and it started as a server discovery, but now it's extending to service. When I'm doing a DevOps delivery, so I have the tools, I have all the tools to provide and provision the information, but in order for the process to be considered completed in terms of then being able to do proper change management on the services, it needs to be automatically discovered and mapped, and then it consider the successful result of the DevOps process. So that is what we've seen from our customers, the main relationship.
Okay, thank you. Next question. We are at the top of the hour, but we allowed a few extra minutes to answer some questions, so we'll try to cover another few here. Do you mandate using the unique naming of CIs to be the FQDN or another sequence?
So one of the things that UCNB does is it has a reconciliation engine that uses a collection of information to be able to identify a particular CI as different than another CI. And the FQDN can be one attribute that you use for that, but there are actually a whole bunch of them. The IT environment that I came from, the FQDN was something that we considered important, and we set up the system. We tweaked a little bit of the configuration to make it so that two servers with different FQDNs would always be considered different. But if that doesn't meet your environment, there are a collection of ways to be able to differentiate. For instance, a server may have a connection to an IP address, and another server with the same name but connection to a different IP address would be considered different servers. And so it's actually a longer discussion, but you really have the choice about how you want to do that based on how your particular enterprise values the data that is out there and how the uniqueness of the data that you have.
Okay, thank you. Next up, assuming that I already have some discovery in the UCMDB, what's the best economic justification to extending discovery and or maturing, enhancing our CMS implementation?
Yeah, I can take it.
So, go for it.
In general, I think it really relates to the use cases that we've provided. So some data usually result in some use cases or none at all. But if we want to do proper change management, if we want to do proper asset management, if we want to do to combine the CMS data to maybe the event system and to understand the impact of events in the system, then the data needs to be comprehensive. It needs to be mapping not just the inventory, but also dependencies and connected to services. So this is really the reason why to do proper discovery use cases, not just to rely on existing silos of data that already exist somehow.
Okay, thank you.
And just to emphasize that point, you really need to make sure that you understand the use case you're going to apply, because if you can collect tons of data inside of UCNB via UD, but if you're collecting data that you don't need or that's not required by the use case, you're really putting stuff in there that you don't need. So just to reemphasize, understand your use cases and then collect the data that's necessary to support that so that you can provide what you need with the content that you have. Not more, not less, but with that content.
Okay, great, thanks. Let's try to hit 2 more questions. The next one is, I already have my network data in a managed system. Can I integrate it with the data that UD discovers?
Yeah, so if it's an HP tool, it's something that we should already have an integration for. If it's a third-party tool, that basically means it's not created by HPE, we have the ability to be able to pull data in from a collection of known systems, and we also have what we call generic database adapter that can talk to another database, and you can train it so that UCMDB understands the context of that data and can incorporate that data into UCMDB in a manner that's consistent both for UCMDB and the source of that data. So yeah, either way.
Great. The last question we have, we are running through a process to ensure we have software compliance. Can UD also manage software compliance?
So UD is a collector of data, and so by itself it does not have the capabilities. What it does is can give you the context for the data that you have. It can collect the data in a form that allows you to be able to identify who owns the data, but you still need something that provides you the context of that data and the entitlements that you may have purchased. And the HPE tools that do that are Asset Manager. So if you were looking at, you would want to know what kind of contracts you had and how many entitlements that you had. And so if you had a contract with Microsoft for Office for 1,000 instances, you would want to use UD to be collecting and searching all of the servers out there that could have Microsoft Office installed or desktops, and then you send that data to Asset Manager, which then compares the data that UD has on how many are out there against the contracts that you have and the entitlements associated with those contracts. So another tool gives context for that particular question, whereas UD provides the data to meet that, to answer the question.
Okay. Great, thank you. So that's all we have, all the time we have for questions. If you could pull up the last couple of slides, we will go ahead and close out the webinar today. So thanks everyone for attending. We hope this was very useful and valuable for you. For more information on Vivid or CMS, you can choose the links below from this presentation, which will be emailed out. There's also a short survey if you would be so kind as to fill that in. Next slide.
I think that's the last one.
Is that the final slide? Okay, one more thing I wanted to add before we're closed. If anyone's interested in the IT Operations Management Summit in Denver in September, there's links out on the Vivid website as well as the HP site. We'd invite you to check that out. It's September 19th through the 22nd, and we'll include some cloud and automation too. So we invite you to visit that event and hope to see you there or on the next webinar for our Service Management Special Interest Group. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.